Avery Quinn awakened in the backseat of a moving luxury vehicle on the street, her head aching in Manhattan, disappearing behind tinted glass. The last thing she remembered was leaving a charity gala near Central Park in a red evening coat. At the coat room, she had collected a black phone identical to her own and slipped it into her purse without checking the screen. Minutes later, two armed men had intercepted her beside the curb. Now autumn forest blurred past the windows as the vehicle followed the Hudson River north. Avery assumed the abduction was connected to her work as a forensic accountant. She had recently uncovered unexplained transfers hidden inside contracts involving medical suppliers and private detention facilities. She had not yet reported them, but someone might have noticed her questions. The vehicle entered a guarded limestone estate overlooking mist-covered water. Private docks extended into the river beneath golden morning sunlight, while formal gardens and pale stone terraces made the property look more like a private resort than a criminal compound. The men escorted Avery into a sunlit library and left her alone. Kieran Maddox entered several minutes later. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 33, with a broad, muscular build, dark hair, a light beard, and tattooed hands visible beneath the cuffs of a charcoal suit. His calm expression carried more authority than a shouted threat. He looked at Avery once and immediately recognized a mistake. His men had been ordered to capture Celeste Merrow, daughter of federal judge Wallace Merrow. Celeste had attended the same gala and apparently owned an identical red coat. Avery expected the error to secure her release. Instead, Kieran examined the phone taken from her purse and ordered every gate dock and access road sealed. The encrypted device contained fragments of financial codes connected to Senator Everett Vane's private prison contracts. Kieran had intended to take Celeste because he believed she possessed evidence related to the murder of his younger brother. Avery knew nothing about Celeste, the senator, or Kieran's criminal empire. That did not make her useless. It made her exposed. Kieran neither threatened her nor attempted to control her clothing, movements inside the estate, or personal space. His restraint unsettled Avery more than open violence. He behaved like a man who did not need to prove that escape was impossible. Left under discreet surveillance, Avery studied the estate. She discovered sealed medical cabinets, emergency passports, children's clothing, and several furnished rooms designed to shelter entire families. The details contradicted everything she assumed about Kieran. Then glass exploded beside her. A rifle shot tore through the library window and struck the wall where her head had been seconds earlier. Kieran crossed the room without hesitation, pulling Avery behind a stone column while another bullet shattered the frame. The sniper had not aimed at the Mafia king. The sniper had aimed at her. In that instant, Avery understood that leaving the estate would not restore her freedom. It would deliver her directly to whoever wanted the phone, and now wanted her silenced. Later, while Kieran's security team searched the opposite riverbank, the encrypted screen finally opened. A recent photograph appeared. Avery's missing sister, June, stood beside Kieran Maddox. Within an hour of the sniper attack, Kieran had emptied the Hudson River estate. Avery was placed in another vehicle before the shattered library windows had finished falling from their frames. The photograph of June remained open on the encrypted phone between them as they traveled south, but Kieran offered no explanation for why he had been standing beside a woman declared missing 6 years earlier. By afternoon, the city had vanished behind winding roads cutting through North Carolina's Blue Ridge Mountains. Waterfalls flashed between cedar trees, mist drifted above steep valleys, and narrow wooden bridges crossed streams far below. Avery suspected Kieran had brought her somewhere no one could hear her accuse him. The house appeared near the edge of a forested slope, its cedar walls overlooking a white waterfall. It had no servants, armed guards, marble floors, or expensive vehicles. Inside, reinforced doors, concealed cameras, emergency medical rooms, and underground food storage revealed its true purpose. It was not a retreat. It was designed to survive an attack. While Kieran strengthened the security system, Avery searched the house. Behind a false wall in the lower hall, she discovered photographs arranged beside coded files. The faces belonged to journalists, translators, accountants, women from immigrant shelters, and former employees of private prisons. Several had been officially declared dead. Others had been described as fugitives, mentally unstable patients, or criminals who had abandoned their families. The records told a different story. Kieran's transport network had secretly moved many of them out of states, controlled by Senator Everett Vane's political allies. Some of the smuggling charges attached to Kieran's name had come from operations that carried endangered witnesses under false identities. Avery's understanding of him fractured again. He was still a criminal. But some of the people called as victims had actually been people he helped disappear before powerful men could kill them. The ugliest truth appeared in the selection records. Contractors had targeted poor defendants, undocumented immigrants, isolated women, and workers without influential relatives because their disappearances were unlikely to attract sustained attention. They had not vanished because no one noticed. They had been chosen because no one powerful was expected to care. Then Avery found June's file. Her sister had uncovered financial codes linking private prison medical budgets to illegal experiments. 6 years earlier, Kieran's organization had attempted to move her to safety. The transfer failed after someone inside the Maddox family leaked the route. The file did not confirm June's death. Kieran had known she might have survived. Avery's anger became colder than fear. His silence no longer resembled protection. It resembled another powerful man deciding which truths she was permitted to know. Using an emergency satellite system, she contacted Agent Naomi Cross. Naomi's warning was immediate. Kieran still profited from bribery, illegal surveillance, smuggling, and violent control of criminal territory. Saving witnesses did not erase the lives his empire had damaged. Before Avery could respond, concealed alarms activated throughout the house. Armed vehicles were climbing the mountain road. Kieran discovered that the attackers had entered using one of his private authorization codes. A recovered security recording showed Kieran Maddox personally giving June's escape route to Senator Vane. The security recording gave Kieran only minutes to act. Before Gideon's vehicles reached the mountain house, he moved Avery through a concealed rear passage and down a forest trail toward another waiting vehicle. By sunrise, they were aboard a private aircraft heading south. The Florida Keys appeared beneath them as scattered coral islands surrounded by turquoise water. Kieran's destination was a tropical compound hidden behind mangrove forests, abandoned military ruins, bright flowers, and weathered concrete towers, once used for coastal communications. The property had later become part of the maritime network controlled by Kieran's father. Avery entered expecting hidden weapons, criminal money, and proof of human trafficking. Instead, she found emergency passports, medical supplies, encrypted radios, relocation schedules, and files documenting witnesses moved under temporary identities. Kieran unlocked June's complete record. Her sister had worked as a financial analyst for a government contractor connected to Senator Vane. While reviewing prison medical budgets, June discovered payments for illegal pharmaceuticals and experiments designed to damage memory. Judge Wallace Merrow had helped declare witnesses mentally unfit before transferring them into private institutions where their testimony could be erased. Celeste Merrow eventually discovered what her father had approved and stole part of his archive. Kieran had intended to capture her only long enough to recover that evidence and identify whoever murdered his younger brother. Avery's kidnapping had truly been a mistake. The phone in her red coat had made her part of the conspiracy. Archive footage showed June entering the compound voluntarily 6 years earlier. She appeared frightened but composed as she gave Kieran encrypted financial codes and placed Avery's photograph among the protected identities. Avery watched her missing sister entrust her safety to the man who had taken her freedom. The discovery should have softened her judgment. It did not. Further records proved Kieran had expanded his smuggling routes while relocating endangered witnesses. Every life he saved strengthened his influence, opened new ports, and weakened rival organizations. He had turned rescue into power. Avery felt increasingly drawn to his restraint and his willingness to expose uncomfortable truths, but she refused to mistake complexity for innocence. She secretly copied files showing bribery, illegal surveillance, and violent territorial seizures, then began transferring them to Naomi. Kieran caught her beside the active terminal. He did not interrupt the transmission. Several files, he revealed, had been deliberately placed within her reach. Every account Avery opened triggered reactions from people inside the Maddox organization, allowing Kieran to identify those still loyal to Gideon. Her intelligence, anger, and investigation had become tools in a war she had never agreed to fight. That evening, a tropical storm struck the compound. Men wearing Coast Guard uniforms surrounded the property and opened fire. Kieran recognized them as imposters and led Avery into a flooded tunnel beneath the mangroves. Near the exit, an explosion drove metal into his side. Avery reached open water first. She could have escaped alone. Instead, she returned and dragged him toward a hidden coastal shelter. Inside, she recovered a damaged recording left by June. Her sister's voice carried one final warning. Avery must never learn she survived because someone inside the Quinn family had sold her location. June's warning followed Avery west like a wound that refused to close. The restored hotel stood alone beneath Arizona's brilliant sunlight, surrounded by red rock canyons, cactus fields, dry riverbeds, and highways vanishing into the desert. Kieran owned it through one of his legitimate companies, but the property had once belonged to the contractor that employed June. That connection made every room feel deliberate. Avery studied her sister's damage recording inside a private suite overlooking the canyon. Someone in the Quinn family had sold June's location. Their father had been dead for years, leaving Avery to wonder whether her mother had betrayed June, or whether another relative had been hiding behind the family's grief. That evening, Agent Naomi Cross entered through a service corridor. She carried evidence proving Kieran had bribed poor officials, obstructed federal investigations, seized criminal routes, and eliminated rival organizations through intimidation and violence. He saved witnesses. Naomi's records made clear. He also built power from the chaos surrounding them. Avery already understood the contradiction. Kieran had protected vulnerable people, but protection did not erase the workers threatened by his organization or the families damaged by his expansion. She refused to replace hatred with blind loyalty simply because he had shown restraint. Later that night, Avery entered Kieran's financial system and prepared to send Naomi enough evidence to dismantle his empire. Kieran found her at the terminal. He saw the active transfer and did not stop it. Instead, he stepped closer, entered the final encryption code, and unlocked the remaining accounts. The gesture unsettled her more than resistance would have. Destroying his empire, he allowed her to understand, might be the only way to expose Gideon and Senator Vane. Several hidden accounts were tied to people inside the Maddox organization whose loyalty could be traced only when the files were threatened. Avery realized her kidnapping, intelligence, grief, and growing trust had all become instruments in Kieran's war. Then she discovered something worse. Years earlier, shortly after June disappeared, Kieran had placed several legitimate companies into a trust bearing Avery's name. He had been protecting her from a distance before she ever knew he existed. The following night, a crowded Desert Arts festival filled the streets near the hotel with lanterns, music, bright fabrics, and market stalls. Forged orders carrying Kieran's authorization redirected his guards away from Avery. Masked men moved through the crowd. They wanted Celeste's phone. Avery escaped between vendors and reached an abandoned railway platform beyond the festival lights. Kieran arrived alone seconds before the attackers cornered her. A shot struck his side as he stepped between Avery and the gunman. She could have left him bleeding beside the tracks, taken his files, and completed the destruction she had prepared. Instead, she dragged him into an old freight carriage and pressed both hands against the wound until the bleeding slowed. Searching his emergency phone for help, Avery found a photograph received only hours earlier. June was alive inside a snow-covered medical facility in Colorado. The message beneath it warned that June would be killed unless Avery delivered Kieran to Senator Vane. Avery refused to trade Kieran for a photograph. Until she saw June with her own eyes, she would trust neither Senator Vane's message nor the hope it had forced into her chest. They drove into the Colorado mountains during a severe snowstorm. Frozen lakes disappeared beneath blowing white powder, pine forests bent under the wind, and isolated roads narrowed between steep cliffs. Kieran's wound remained bandaged, but every movement revealed the pain he refused to acknowledge. The institution appeared beyond the trees, like a fortress buried in snow. Official records described it as a rehabilitation center for protected witnesses and injured federal contractors. Kieran called it a place where inconvenient people were erased without being killed. Vane's network declared patients dead, criminal, unstable, or mentally unfit before assigning them false identities. June had been held there because she memorized financial codes connecting illegal prison experiments to federal contracts. Avery turned on Kieran with a fury colder than the storm. He had suspected for years that June might be alive. Kieran had remained silent because each attempt to verify her location caused another witness to disappear. Avery understood the danger, but understanding did not lessen betrayal. He had decided which truths she could survive while claiming to protect her freedom. That fracture between them felt deeper than captivity. They entered through an abandoned maintenance tunnel beneath the frozen lake. Inside, fluorescent corridors stretched past locked medical rooms where patients received drugs designed to damage memory and weaken future testimony. The records revealed an uglier system. Black defendants, Latino immigrants, indigenous women, poor patients, and people without stable families had been selected disproportionately. Officials believed their disappearances would produce fewer questions and less public outrage. These people had not vanished because the system failed to notice them. They had been chosen because the system believed no one important would care. Avery found June inside a restricted medical wing. Her sister was alive, painfully thin, and weakened by years of medication. Recognition came slowly. When Avery embraced her, June's body remained rigid before her trembling hands finally closed around Avery's coat. Then June saw Kieran. Fear replaced recognition. She believed he had betrayed the escape route that led to her capture. While Kieran disabled the lockdown system, Avery searched the archive footage. One recording showed Kieran Maddox personally delivering June to the facility. Another showed Senator Vane meeting privately with the hospital director. Kieran placed a weapon in Avery's hand. He did not ask her trust. He allowed her to decide whether he deserved to leave with them. Before she could answer, Gideon arrived with private guards. He admitted planting evidence connecting Kieran to June's disappearance and his younger brother's murder. He had expected Avery's hatred to turn her into the perfect weapon against the Maddox heir. June's memory returned in painful fragments. Their mother had revealed June's location only after Vane threatened to kill Avery. Alarms erupted as the facility entered lockdown. Avery, June, and Kieran escaped across the frozen lake, while bullets fractured the ice behind them. Near the opposite shore, June revealed that Gideon was protected by the one person Kieran had trusted since childhood, his own mother. June's warning carried them east toward the Maine coast. Lenora Maddox's whitestone mansion stood above towering sea cliffs, facing an Atlantic storm that hurled violent waves against the rocks below. Pine-covered islands vanished beneath rain, while bright flashes of stormlight crossed the mansion's tall windows. Lenora received Avery, Kieran, and June without visible surprise. Her calm recognition of June confirmed the betrayal before she explained it. Years earlier, Lenora had helped Kieran, and June established the original witness relocation network. She knew Senator Vane controlled judges, contractors, private prisons, and compromised federal investigators. She had also known that Gideon leaked June's escape route, yet she protected him. Exposing Gideon, Lenora believed, would have divided the Maddox organization and triggered a civil war that could kill hundreds. She chose the stability of the empire over justice for the people's sacrifice to preserve it. Kieran absorbed the truth without raising his voice. His expression barely changed, but Avery saw devastation in the stillness of his body. The woman he had protected his entire life had protected the man who destroyed his brother and delivered June to Vane. Lenora revealed that Kieran's late father had approved the contract that led to June's capture. Kieran opposed the operation, but at the time he lacked enough authority to stop it completely. When his younger brother threatened to expose the network, Gideon murdered him. Lenora concealed the evidence to protect the Maddox name. Avery finally understood Kieran's emotional isolation. He had spent years gathering evidence against the people he loved while pretending to remain loyal to them. But understanding his pain did not excuse the system around him. Both government officials and Mafia leaders had treated innocent lives as strategic costs. Their methods differed, but their reasoning was the same. Power mattered more than people without protection. Before Lenora could reveal everything, Gideon's forces attacked through the coastal storm. Gunfire shattered the eastern windows as armed men entered the mansion and moved toward June. Kieran held the main corridor, while Lenora guided Avery and June through a hidden passage behind the library. The passage led to a sealed archive. Inside were prison contracts, political payments, murder authorizations, surveillance files, and direct proof linking Gideon to both June's capture and Kieran's brother's death. Lenora admitted she had deliberately allowed Avery to remain near Kieran after the mistaken kidnapping. She believed Avery might give her son a reason to stop sacrificing himself. Avery rejected the role immediately. She was not a reward for his suffering or a tool created to redeem him. Any connection between them would have to exist through truth, accountability, and personal choice. After Gideon's attack failed, Kieran confronted Lenora before the remaining Maddox loyalists. He permanently removed her authority and froze every account under her control. The archive identified Gideon and Senator Vane's next destination, a private fundraising gala in Manhattan. Before they left, Lenora gave Avery June's original letter. It confirmed that Kieran had kidnapped the wrong woman, but Gideon had arranged a coat room exchange so Celeste's phone would reach Avery. Avery was the wrong woman for Kieran to kidnap, but she was exactly the woman Gideon intended to take. Lenora's confession brought them back to Manhattan, beneath a ceiling of glass and winter light. Senator Everett Vane's charity gala filled an exclusive conservatory overlooking Central Park. Indoor gardens, elegant terraces, crystal fixtures, and bright city towers surrounded politicians, judges, investors, police commanders, prison executives, and federal contractors. Gideon Maddox moved among them as a respected shipping philanthropist. Avery entered beside Kieran as his public companion, fully aware that Vane expected her to betray him before the evening ended. Outside, Agent Naomi cross-coordinated the federal evidence team, although several participating agents might still belong to Vane. Kieran led Avery onto the central stage. Before hundreds of guests, he transferred control of his key legitimate companies into her name. The room responded as though they had witnessed a romantic declaration from a powerful man. In reality, Kieran had given Avery the legal authority to release the Maddox financial records without permission from his organization. He placed the weapon against his own empire directly into her hands. While June entered through the service network and uploaded evidence from a Colorado institution, Avery studied the influential faces surrounding her. Many of those guests had approved contracts, buried investigations, dismissed missing prisoners, or ignored disappearing immigrants and workers. The network had not survived because its victims were invisible. It had survived because respectable people decided those victims were less valuable than careers, money, and public reputation. Naomi's signals suddenly disappeared. Gideon emerged on an upper terrace, holding her captive, and demanded Kieran surrender. Kieran moved forward without hesitation, willing to trade himself to prevent further violence. Avery approached Vane carrying the encrypted files capable of imprisoning the Mafia king who had kidnapped her. To the watching guests, she appeared ready to complete her revenge. Vane accepted the drive. Every public screen inside the conservatory turned black. Then the network appeared. Private accounts, prison payments, medical experiments, political bribes, compromised officers, Gideon's murder orders, and records from a snowbound institution spread across the glass walls and presentation screens. June's uploaded evidence exposed Gideon's role in her disappearance and the murder of Kieran's younger brother. Gideon released Naomi and fled toward the rooftop greenhouse. When he turned back toward Avery with a weapon, Kieran intercepted him before he could fire. At the same moment, Lenora entered the conservatory. Before the city's most powerful witnesses, she confirmed her family's involvement and admitted she had protected Gideon. The confession destroyed the reputation she had preserved through years of silence. Vane's security team lowered their weapons when their own hidden contracts appeared on screen. Federal officers entered and arrested Vane, Gideon, Judge Merrow, and the officials exposed by the records. Kieran made no attempt to escape. He voluntarily gave Naomi access to every remaining Maddox account, route, and protected archive. Only then did Avery discover that he had prepared a legal confession before the gala. His plan had always ended with surrender once June was rescued and Avery was beyond Vane's reach. Avery finally possessed the power to destroy the man who had taken her freedom. Using it also meant imprisoning the man who had risked everything to return her family. Before Kieran was taken away, Avery discovered that his confession included responsibility for a murder committed by Lenora. Several months after the Manhattan arrests, the Maddox empire no longer controlled the shadows. Senator Vane, Gideon Maddox, Judge Merrow, and the officials who protected them faced prosecution. Their contracts, prison records, and hidden payments became evidence in investigations stretching across several states. June recovered at a peaceful rehabilitation estate on the Northern California coast. Redwood forests surrounded fields of wildflowers above the Pacific, where bright sunlight crossed the water and distant mountains softened the horizon. From a quiet office overlooking the cliffs, she helped investigators decode the remaining financial records. Avery used the legitimate companies Kieran had transferred to her to establish a recovery fund for families harmed by illegal imprisonment, witness disappearances, and the Maddox organization. Kieran remained in federal custody. His confession admitted bribery, smuggling, obstruction, intimidation, and the violent expansion of his criminal network. Avery refused to pretend that protecting witnesses erased those crimes. He had saved vulnerable people, but had also built power through fear and illegal control. Then she discovered that one charge was false. Kieran had accepted responsibility for a murder committed by Lenora. He intended to prevent his mother from receiving a life sentence, continuing the same pattern that had nearly destroyed him, protecting others through his own destruction. Avery refused to let sacrifice become another form of control. Using June's testimony, the main archive, surveillance footage, and Lenora's eventual confession, she proved Kieran had not committed the murder. His genuine offenses remained, but his cooperation dismantled a wider network and reduced his sentence. Before his transfer to a lower security facility, Avery visited him. A glass partition divided the room. Neither of them reached toward it. Their silence carried everything that promises could not repair. Avery removed the tracking bracelet Kieran had given her after the kidnapping and placed it on the table. The relationship created by captivity, fear, and danger was over. Kieran accepted the decision without asking her to wait. Several years later, he arrived at the California estate alone. He brought no guards, criminal authority, luxury convoy, or expectation of forgiveness. Avery had transformed the property into a legal and financial center for families of missing witnesses and wrongfully detained prisoners. Kieran had used his remaining legitimate assets to compensate workers and victims harmed by the Maddox empire. June finally revealed why he had refused to release Avery during the first night at the River Estate. Gideon had already placed Avery's name on an assassination list. Keeping her near him had been the only immediate way to keep her alive. Kieran had accepted her hatred because freedom without protection would have sent her directly to her death. But protection had never given him ownership of her future. Avery found him standing near the ocean cliffs. Several feet remained between them, filled with years of consequences, grief, and truth. No criminal agreement bound them. No debt demanded loyalty. No danger forced her to remain. Her revenge had succeeded by destroying the lies and inherited power that made their captivity necessary. Only after Kieran surrendered his empire did Avery step toward him by choice.